Hello, welcome to Abiding Life Studios. I'm Noah Wells. Today I have with me Shay Wells.
Hello.
And I have Steve Reinhard and Tim Lester with us.
Great to be with you all.
Hey guys.
Great to be with you guys. And we are going to just dive right into this conversation about divorce. So Steve got a hold of me a little bit ago and wanted to talk about it. And I, of course, was a little terrified, I would say. I mean, I know a lot of people think I'm very open about my life, but I don't know, for some reason this one got me really scared to talk about. And so I'm just going to say it right now. Yes, I have been divorced. I was married when I was 23. The marriage did not last long at all. And I'm a divorcee, if you will.
So Noah, can I ask, before we actually talk about the divorce, like why do you think, what was the thought, but riding along with the fear of saying that?
I don't know. I guess for me, it was another thing for someone to judge me about. And maybe people won't listen to me anymore. Maybe people think I don't belong in ministry. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff that was going on into my head. And yeah, so I was pretty, you get all those fears and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't do this. Let's just do a different podcast. But
what changed your mind? That you'd be judged, that heck, you don't know, like I might be judging you, or Tim, or the rest of the people that listen to this, we still might be judging you and looking down on you, and thinking you shouldn't be in ministry. Like what changed your mind to?
Well, there were probably two things. Shay and I were reading the Bible last night because I knew I was going to do this podcast, so I wanted to kind of see what God and Jesus thought about divorce. And I kind of came across a scripture. Of course, I'm terrible with quoting scripture, but it basically said, if you're terrified of saying something, that's pride. So I said, well, all right, I'll take that. I better not be that. So I'm going to dive right into it. And another thing is usually when I'm fearful, it's usually Satan talking to me and trying to talk me out of it. And so I do enjoy just stepping right into fear. Not enjoy. Let me rephrase that. I go into it probably tiptoeing into it, but I do enjoy doing it at the end of it because bringing stuff into the light always does help me. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, well, Noah, just for everybody that's listening, just so they know, and I tell you this all the time, that just happens to have the luxury of being in the Bible.
Right.
And in Ephesians chapter 5, it talks about that very thing. When stuff's brought into the light, exposed to the light of Christ and truth, it explodes the darkness. So, and that includes fear. So you're dead on about that.
Yeah. And I was talking to Betty earlier today, and I was telling her this is the podcast I'd be doing, because I was actually kind of hoping she'd say, oh, no, don't do that. I could use her as an excuse, but no, she said I should do it. But, it is interesting to me. I was thinking about the woman I divorced before, and what kind of made me in that direction of getting away from her was I would be honest with her, and instead of giving me grace or acceptance, she actually used it against me of my struggles in my life. And so I was just telling Mom about the difference between Shay and her was, Shay has asked me some pretty deep questions about my past, and absolutely terrified to tell her. I remember one time I would just start pouring sweat because I was so terrified of the rejection. And then I actually thought, oh great, if I tell her the truth, she's going to divorce me. And then all of a sudden I did tell her, and she goes, oh yeah, I get that. I was like, well, okay, she gives me love. She gave me the grace I needed to show me God's love through that. And she accepted me. And when that happened too, it made me realize how important it is to share things out loud and bring them into the light.
Sure.
I mean, it is very freeing. I mean, what you're saying, it's very freeing to say, be able to say something and have someone not use it against you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at right at this moment. What do you guys think?
I like what you're saying. I think
Yeah, you're dead on.
and I love following in your footsteps. Although it is scary,
Mm-hmm.
I follow in your footsteps because I think you are a leader in bringing things to the light.
Yeah.
Our humanness and our weaknesses, and all the things we'd like to patch up and cover up, and all your cracks. When we have that story about the cracked pot, is like, oh my gosh, I remember the first time I heard that, it's like, oh my, I don't want to be that cracked pot. I got so many cracks. I'm busy patching them, like to grab a little mud and stick it on this crack and this crack. But you, like you said, you kind of step into it, maybe tiptoe, but you still step into the things, into the light, like you said, into the things that are scary and fearful. So I'm right there with you. And so divorce is, I think, another one of those scary topics for us to dive into, because Tim is like an educated theologian, but Noah and I don't know about Shay, she probably is too, but Noah and I aren't, and we don't claim to be experts or Bible scholars, but I do think that in one way, and it'll sound maybe a little arrogant, we're experts at walking with God humbly. I really believe that. I have like tons of confidence to be able to walk humbly with God. And so I like what you're saying, Noah. And I think this is such an important topic. And so many of my friends and my relatives have, and I'm going to say it different. I'm going to say they've experienced divorce. They've experienced divorce. I never have. So I'm kind of don't have the experience or background to say too much about it. So I'm curious to learn from you guys and walk with the Lord with you and my many other friends, because actually most of the people I hang out with have been divorced. So with that, what's your guys' take on divorce in our community and kind of the abiding life community and the people we hang out with?
Well, I mean, a couple of quick disclaimers is this. Anybody that's listened to the podcast, and especially in relationship to what our heart is with Abiding Life Ministries International, is one, people get off track about divorce and experiencing divorce, like you were saying, Steve, because they're scared to death that if grace is applied to it in any way, that suddenly all of a sudden you're saying, hey, listen, divorce is no big deal. You ask anybody that's been through it, it's hell on earth. It's not a good thing. All that mamby-pamby stuff that's on TV about, you go over and have coffee with your ex and your new husband and, and everybody plays nice. And that is not reality. And so it is hell on earth. And we need to have that discussion. I appreciate that. But just because we're having this discussion and we might say somehow that God's grace even reaches into, God forbid, divorce, we're not saying it's a good thing or woohoo, let's all go get divorced, or that it's not a big deal, because it is. So that would probably be the first big disclaimer. So don't cut out on us if you hear us say something that God does something in the middle of divorce. That shouldn't shock us, but we act like it does.
Yeah.
So that'd be my first thing is there's many conversations to have about this.
Well, yeah, and it's not like I woke up one day when I was married and just said, oh, I want to get a divorce now. Mm-hmm. There was a lot that led up to feeling like she wanted out, a lot of arguing, a lot of dysfunction to push us towards that direction. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like what you guys are both saying, and so we're not saying go get divorced.
No,
we're not saying divorce is good and fun, and it's like it's the next best thing to hot fudge sundae.
Yeah,
we're not saying that at all. And what kind of prompted this podcast was Noah and I were sitting and we were talking about our relationships and the things like Tim had mentioned that lead up to a divorce, and our relationships, and so I was saying to you, next time I get to do a wedding, I'm going to do a wedding, and it's going to be something like this. There's going to be part of the vows, like repeat after me, like Shay, please repeat after me. It's there, Noah. At some point in my life, I'm going to hate your guts and think you are the worst person in the whole world. And I'm going to say to myself, I can't be happy married to this guy. I'm finished. I'm completely 100% done with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd say the same thing to Noah. Noah, please repeat to me, because this is the reality. You're actually going to have those feelings. You're going to have those thoughts like, I am finished. Mm-hmm. And the reason I would want to tell someone that is so they wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. And can we just do like a show of hands here? Have any of you guys ever had those feelings like I'm done, or those thoughts with your current spouse? Like maybe more than once.
Yeah.
And so those are what I would say are normal relationship problems. And so when you hit that, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you guys want to weigh in on this, but I would say when you hit that roadblock, when you hit that, bang your head against that person and they don't actually meet your spiritual need, and you find out they got tons of flaws and they're actually sometimes they're kind of a jerk, mm-hmm. Then you don't have to back away. You could do what Noah does so well and just say how you're feeling and mm-hmm. tiptoe closer and say, this is how I'm feeling. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And find out how the other person is and then go to the Lord. So that's what I'm thinking. And that's kind of how we got on this topic is that I think for all of us, or at least most of the people that I hang out with at some point in a relationship, we want distance, what a distance mm-hmm. and divorce is like the ultimate in distance.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Well, Steve, let me ask you that. First of all, Steve, I took careful notes about those vows, so I'm going to use that in my next ceremony that I do.
Get paid up front.
Yeah. I'll give you an honorable mention in the wedding.
Yeah. Okay.
But just side note, I mean, Steve, what you're saying is so true. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a guy the other day, and funny enough, they're going to get married, but they were talking about, well, what if we decide we want a divorce? And I said, dude, the Bible assumes when it says love your wife as Christ loved the church. Well, the church was his enemy. So that means to love her like Christ loved the church, you have to assume she's going to be your enemy. Mm. And you're going to show up and give everything to her. He goes, so what are you saying? Said it's not optional. If you're going to say yes today, not optional down the road, because that's what you're signing up for. So that's why I like those vows so much. But Steve, you were talking about earlier, if you wouldn't mind, if you a little story about when you were riding some folks. I thought it identified a sort of the attitude about divorce that many people have. Are you okay with sharing that?
Yeah, but jog my mind.
Well, riding in the back of the Jeep when you were out of the
Oh,
country.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had breakfast today with a buddy of mine who said, like, I'm just like, just to let you know, I'm against divorce. And it's like, okay, I'm glad you told me. And I'd been visiting some friends, and we were kind of talking about hard spots, hitting the rough parts in relationships. And a couple of the guys asked me that I was with, so what do you think about divorce? And I said, well, I think it's a temptation that, we all run into that temptation. And I said, but what do you think? And the first guy goes, well, I'm not sure. I'm kind of making up my mind. He wasn't married yet. His brother said, like, absolutely not. If you get divorced, you go to hell. And then the dad was there with us and said, yeah, like it's fact. It's like, and it's an undeniable fact. Everybody knows this, Steve. Like, what are you, kind of moron? Yeah, if you get divorced, you go to hell. That's the truth. And so then, I think that's a common belief.
Yes.
Even though we like grace and we like to abide, we kind of have mixed, goofy messages in our beliefs. And so one of them is you can abide and you can be saved by grace unless you're divorced, or unless you commit suicide, or unless you whatever the thing is that I'm not doing. So anyway, so
and I think I agree. I was just going to say that I think what I've heard people verbalize to me is they're afraid if they don't put that kind of restraint on it, and even definition of what they see the scriptures teaching, that they're somehow giving everybody like written permission to go divorce somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's out of fear. And so I'm just going to make this so hard and so fast that everybody will be scared into not getting a divorce.
Yeah. I think you're right. So we haven't heard from Shay. I'm curious, Shay, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I wanted to see what Shay thought, because she is the product of a divorce.
True. Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about listening to you guys talking is how divorce is such an accepted part of our society, but such a taboo topic in Christianity, where then I feel like as a Christian, you have to be either hot or cold. You have to either go along with the norms of society and accept divorce, or you have to be, no, you're going to hell. That's not what God wants. On that side, instead of a more, what I'm going to call, realistic thought on it, where quite honestly, you have two imperfect humans living a life together. And I think sometimes we have this thought going into marriage of like, this is going to be perfect and it's going to be great because dating was so fun and now we're married. And like, you can sit there and say, we're never getting a divorce, it's not happening, but really you don't know. And I think that there's always this part of people that's always hot or cold. And I think that the biggest thing that we've learned in our marriage is, even though divorce is not part of our vocabulary, we have been close. Mm-hmm. There have been times where we both questioned, is our marriage going down a path that we don't want it to go down? But I think a lot of people then don't have the communication that we have. And then I feel like you feel alone as a Christian of, if you go talk to your girlfriends, let's say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw women under the bus for a moment. We sit around and hate our husbands. You go and you listen to women at the coffee shop and it's, my husband did this and my husband did that. And all it's doing is solidifying what you have turning inside of you. if you go out with your friends and you're already having turmoil at home and you need honest conversations, but you go and meet your girlfriends who are all like, oh my gosh, this is awful, your husband is terrible, you really should divorce him. Well, you go home going, my girlfriend's just said that, right? But there's no like true communication, I guess, that I'm seeing. It's just come and I'll bash you, and then you go home, and then I'm supposed to make things right with a guy that my friends just told me they've hated for 10 years. You know, because it's such a societal thing to be normal. And I do want to, is it okay if I tell a story? Mm-hmm. I do want to tell just a story about how this happened to us so recent, and we both looked at each other and we said, how many couples divorce because of what we just went through? Because there was one day that I woke up, we hadn't been fighting, there was no turmoil within our marriage, we were really fine. We were, you know, it's a pandemic, but we're fine. And I woke up and I instantly felt this heaviness that we should get divorced. It just hit me. And I was like, he would be happier without me. I would be happier without him. We'll make it work with our kids. It'll be fine. And it kind of just turned within me for a half a day, and I was really struggling with this. And so I went to him and I said, I've been feeling all day that we should get a divorce. And I don't know why, but I feel this heaviness that you would be happier without me. And he goes, well, funny thing is yesterday I thought the exact same thing. Like Satan had bugged us both 24 hours apart from each other. And what would have happened if he bugged us on the same day? What choices would we have then made because of something?
Or you don't question your thoughts. Like
right.
When he bugged me that day, I just said, okay, let's go into that. Let me really think about divorcing Shay. And then I went down this whole thing of what path I would take, do this, I would do that. And then I kept going, and I finally got to the end of it, and it was me hanging myself. Okay, I don't want to divorce Shay.
Yeah.
And then I just told Satan, I'm good.
Yeah.
I want to live. So then I just put it out of my head, and I didn't think anything of it to talk to her about it. But then the next morning, she had it. And then we had a really nice talk when we got to talk about it. We got to, and then realize how many other couples have this same thought, don't go to each other, or maybe even do go to each other. And yeah, it does sound like a great idea.
Well, and don't question it, because that morning, everything he did irritated me. Because I had already had a thought of we were just going to get a divorce. There was no reason for, I did think that. I was like, what am I going to tell people? I have no reason. It's just I woke up and wanted to divorce him one day. But then everything he did irritated me. So how many times do we then have that thought? And then we're looking for reasons. And then we see the reasons of why that's a good idea because we search for it. Because if I'm searching for a reason to not like him, there's going to be day, and same with, clearly it goes with me too. If he's looking for reasons to not like me or to divorce me, he'll find 500 in a day.
Sure.
Yeah, that's so true. We don't have to look very far to get our beliefs confirmed, do we?
No, not at all.
Especially when we're listening to the enemy. It was like you said, Shay, everything he did irritated you. So we talked last week where we talked about listening to God, and I think that would be another key way to listen to God, or to know if I'm listening to God or to the enemy. I'm just kind of backtracking a little bit. Is if every time I'm around somebody, everything they do irritates me, I'm probably not listening to the Lord in me, and I'm probably not seeing Christ in them. I'm probably listening to the accuser of the brothers, the Christians. And so I really like what you're saying. I think there's so much truth in so many different ways we could go from there. So Noah, how was that for you, Noah?
Yeah, I guess,
having Shay say that, I'm just thinking of, if Barb said that to me, what that would be like.
Yeah, I guess when she first said it, I was terrified, because then I was like, I really, I really hope you're not still listening to that, because I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be alone. And so I think when she first said it, I was absolutely terrified. And then I just stayed quiet because I wanted to hear where she was coming from on it. And then once she more talked about it, then I was like, okay, makes more sense. But yeah, at first I was definitely a little nervous.
Yep.
That she might actually listen to that
Yeah.
thought in her head and start really going with it, because she's right. I do a lot of weird things. I am not perfect. I obsess on weird things. Like before we go to bed, I check the doors like 8 times to make sure they're locked. I do weird things like that. Of course, that's going to drive someone absolutely crazy. Definitely if they're looking for something to drive them crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you checked the locks that many times.
Another thing that you mentioned that kind of ties back into what Tim said when we're promising or making vows is like I can only commit for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, and I don't know, actually I'm really learning to listen better with Barb, but I don't actually know what's going on in her mind a lot of the times and what she's thinking and what she's doing. And we were joking before the podcast is like, hey, I'm not like Noah, I haven't been divorced, so I can kind of look down my nose at him,
Uh-huh.
but then I qualified it by saying, at least not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even though I may not ever want to have a divorce, Barb's out of my control, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Barb's she's an independent person. She will do what she wants. And so, that's another, I think, perspective that we need to acknowledge is that, you may not want to, your vows, you may not want to get divorced, but the other person's, it's in one sense is a free agent.
Yeah.
We're one, that's for sure. We are one.
Yeah.
But there's I've never been able to control Barb, my kids, or anybody else.
Yeah.
So they are.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. And if I can just tag on to that just real quickly, I'm going to make a statement, if I never hear again, it'll be about 20 years too late. Every time we sit down in a group, especially if I'm in a group of believers and the issue of divorce comes up, I'll have somebody say, and it's usually when they say it, everybody else goes, amen, amen. If they make this statement, well, it takes 2 to get a divorce. Well, and in the South, when something's completely ludicrous, not smart, not wise, not right, or just plain stupid, we say that's a bunch of hooey. And so that's what this is. Because there are many people that I run on, that I meet with, that there's usually one of them that is willing to move heaven and earth, quit jobs, do whatever they got to do to make this work. And they've got a person that they're with that, even if the person that doesn't want a divorce wants to try to make it right, even if they do have things that they do wrong, they're willing to do everything they got to do. But if the other person decided, look, I'm not doing this, I'm not working on it, I'm done with this, you can't make them do anything. And so what happens is the person that really doesn't want this divorce, we just heap more and more guilt on them.
Yeah.
When we say things like, well, it takes 2 people to get a divorce. Really? No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, and to kind of piggyback off of that about the guilt and things that we put on people who get divorced, my parents were married 22 years before they got divorced. And I grew up in a home of hearing, you're so lucky your parents are still divorced, or your parents are still together. You're you know, you're a part of a small statistic. You should be so proud that your parents are still together. My parents were leaders in the youth group. My parents were big in the church. We didn't start going to church until I was 13 when I accepted Christ, and I brought my parents to church with me. When I was 17, my parents divorced. And it wasn't even necessarily the pain of my parents' divorce that was so painful. It was the church kicking us out. It was zero resources for my family. It was I was no longer welcome at the youth group that my parents were a part of that were such a huge resource for me. It was the guilt and the shame that people who were believers who were supposed to be pouring Jesus into me took not only my parents out of me, but also took Jesus with them, honestly. I walked away from God at that point in my life because divorce affects kids so much, no matter what age they're at. I was 17. Everyone's like, oh, you were almost an adult. It still to this day affects me. I still have residual things with it. I still have things I work through. But I think we can do better as the church of Jesus, as the body of Christ, to not shame and guilt people who have a divorce and say things like, well, what'd your spouse do? Whose fault was it? What's that look like? Who, you know, did somebody cheat, right? Like we try to put all of these things on divorce when I think we need to look at it as two imperfect people come together that have the freedom of choice. And you can't control, like what Steve was saying, you can't control what the other person chooses. And it doesn't matter if there was an affair or fell out of love or whatever the reason is. It's the heart behind Jesus of backing them up and loving them and walking through that. Because I think that that was the most painful part of the divorce, at least for me and for my parents. I'm sure it wasn't the most painful part for my parents, but I know that that was painful, was the guilt and the shame and getting kicked out of church and those things that came along with this huge life event that was happening for them.
Yeah, I think you're right on, Shay. We've oftentimes we've kind of dropped the ball as part of the body, and instead of we wouldn't do that if well, maybe we would. I'm thinking out loud here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would say we wouldn't. I was gonna say we wouldn't do that if someone's spouse died or if they lost a child or. But then I know people that have died in my grandparent, and I've known a guy that has had his child die, and it's like, maybe it's just we don't love very good. We don't really care. We don't allow Christ to love through us very well as a community, and because I'm thinking of those things, and it's like, well, yeah. We weren't there for him when his son was killed. And people weren't there for me when my granddad died. And I do have to say, having been diagnosed with cancer, I was overwhelmed with love. So it's better to get cancer than divorced, because
That's right.
the body will be there for you.
Yes.
Which is sick.
Yep. Well, and Shay, here's the thing. If I can tag on to what you said, I'm just want to make sure people hear everything you're saying. There's nobody on this podcast at this point that says we don't believe the Bible or we don't believe what the Bible teaches about divorce.
Right.
I'm not even going to go into it, because if you don't know, go read the Bible, but don't read it with your presuppositions about what it means in application. So that's my first statement. The second statement is this. One of the ways we don't love well is illustrated by something that doesn't have anything to do with divorce. Jesus was a master at knowing to love people enough to say what they needed when they needed it. And he would tell one person one thing, and it looks like they don't have that big a sin in their life at all. And he'd tell another one that has this gargantuan sin, and by comparison, it looks like they let him off easy. So example would be rich young ruler, done everything right from his birth, you know, Master, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. What do I do? He says, go sell everything you got. And the guy went away sadly. And obviously there was something, we can speculate, but there was something going on with this guy and his money. But comparatively, he was the best church going guy on the planet. I realized it was a synagogue, but he was super righteous. And Jesus filleted this guy. But I mean, in terms of, you know, with his words, now I'm not saying he yelled at him, so maybe I shouldn't say fillet, but it comes to the woman at the well, who's, or several women that were caught in adultery. And he says, go and quit sinning. Okay. That just doesn't equal up. It just in my mind of, you know, everybody, he did more, she did less, or she did worse. It doesn't fit. But Jesus knew exactly what they wanted to hear. And same thing with the Pharisees. You want to talk about somebody he filleted, check out the book of Matthew, chapter 23. He says, you guys are a bunch of low dogs, a bunch of snakes, a bunch of empty tomb, the whole words that he used there. But they were the most righteous guys on the planet. And so I take that in terms of when I deal with people for myself. And oh, by the way, we haven't said it. I don't know if anybody knows it. You guys certainly know it. Over 25 years ago now, I went through a divorce myself. I'm now remarried to my wife, Karen, who works with me in the ministry. And so, excuse me. My point is that there are times, so if I have to now interact with other people who have gone through divorce, maybe I ought to take a cue from Jesus. And I got a feeling if I ask him first, because he's in me, he will cue me to deal with this the way. There are some times when I need to look at a guy, gal, and look at him and go, look, you couldn't be more wrong. You are dead wrong about this. I love you. I'm going to be the last one standing with you. But what in the world are you thinking? And there are some people who are laying there bleeding on the floor from this thing. They need to hear me say, listen, I don't care what happens. I don't care who says what to you. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to care about you. And I want you to quit beating yourself up over the fact that this divorce is happening. And let's get on with what Jesus is doing in you right now. Jesus loved people enough to tell them the right truth at the right time in the right way. But we've come up with one answer. God hates divorce, which the Bible does teach that. God hates divorce. And Steve has said earlier, the prevalent idea is, and you're going to hell. And maybe there's some people that need to hear, dude, you need to be looking over your shoulder because you're blowing off Jesus right and left. And by the way, he loves you. So he's coming for you because he wants you. He wants you. And to, more of a warning to them. And for others, they don't need to hear the warning. They're going, go and sin no more. You see what I'm saying, Shay? And so to your point, we need to ask some ways about how do we love people in the middle of that and not apply the same answer and the same response to all of them, because it doesn't work.
Well, and just like we've talked recently too, is God's in everything, but I feel like Christians are only behind this fence of God's in everything, but I think a lot of times as believers, it's like, oh no, God wouldn't be in a divorce. He doesn't have plans for that. But as believers, don't we have to see that God is in everything and he has gone before us and he has created our path? And sometimes we go through things that are painful and against what other people may think we need in our life. But God can use anything for good because he is in everything. Yep. And I think sometimes we miss that point of like, God's in everything except for the sin that I most disapprove.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So kind of following up on that, Shay, and what some of the things we've talked about, how would you, maybe we could like make a few list of things that lead up to divorce, or at least lead up to that point where we go like, I'm done. You know, that's the word that comes up in me is like, done. I'm, you know, like can't take anymore. And you got any ideas? Anybody?
Well, you mentioned one, Shay. So I'd like to put number one on the list is what Shay and Noah were talking about when they said when it becomes, have enough awareness of that these thoughts are coming out of nowhere, they don't make sense, that I'm open enough to say it out loud to each other. You know, and not as a, hey, look, I'm here to fight with you and convince you to get a divorce, but this is crazy. This is what's been going on in my head.
Yeah.
So that's you're right. Very few people do that. So that can definitely contribute.
Yeah, so that would be like the flip side of that. The contribute would be as like, I would have that thought and those feelings, and then I would never tell Barb.
Yeah.
I would just mull that over in my mind and mull it over, or like Shay. Just so you know, Shay, guys never get together with their friends and bash their wives.
Oh, I'm sure not.
So you're right. It's just women that do that.
Yeah, you guys just sit around and talk about how amazing your wives are.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. It's so true, except for when we don't. And so that would be the thing that I would throw out there is that, and we could phrase it either way. We could say, well, what are things that don't lead up to divorce, or what do? And so not being open, not saying what those feelings and those thoughts are, does lead up to a divorce, and doing what you guys did. Obviously, you're not divorced yet. So far today, and I like living the Christian life by the moment. And so you're not divorced. We don't know what'll happen tomorrow. But I think also I would put on there either positively listening to the voice of the Lord, what you did, and bringing it into the light. Is those two things I'd put on that list. And then the flip side of that would be is like listen to the voice of the enemy,
right,
and keep it covered up in the darkness. That those are all things that we could either use to we're gonna get to the end of that path, and like Noah said, hang yourself or kill somebody or do something on one path, or rub shoulders. But so Shay, you mentioned that you can see God in everything, and so I'm gonna just do my normal devil's advocate thing. Is like, oh my gosh, like Noah's. I'm not sure what Noah will look like at his worst moment to you, but say Noah's complaining about you all the time, and how are you? Like maybe you could probably come up with a situation where it would be difficult to see God in that situation.
Well, I think for me, because I have a lot of pain and things, it's hard for me to see God in the situation while you're in the situation. So when you're in it, there's a lot of times you don't see God in it. It's, it's painful and it's hard and it's awful. But then after, you're like, oh, there he was. Like, there he was in that. And then we were talking about that recently was, I was a single mom when I met Noah, and I hadn't been married, so I haven't ever been divorced. But I did have a baby out of wedlock, which was very frowned upon when I did go to church 7 months pregnant with no somebody by my side. And, when I met him, I didn't see God in having a baby with a cocaine addict. I didn't see God in the abuse that I had endured, that I had experienced with my ex. I didn't see God. I had thought that God left me. Now I can look back and I can see how I left with 50 cents to my name. My bank account was negative $4,000 because he had stolen my identity. I had to go to court for bad check writing classes, even though he did it. And now I can go, man, God saved me. He helped me get an apartment, a job, enrolled in school within 2 weeks, all these things that now don't make sense, where at that time I didn't see him in it. So I think a lot of times I don't see God in it at the time. Even like when we're fighting in things or whatever, I'm not like, man, God's really going to do something with this, you know? And when I'm being a jerk, I'm not like, listen, put up with me being a jerk because God's in this, right? But it's always after the fact that you're like, okay, now I can see God in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to add a point to your list too, if we can backtrack, a point to your list of kind of reasons why, or however you were wording it. This is something that Noah and I talk about that maybe he can elaborate on, is the 10% rule of when.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, why don't you explain it?
You're doing good.
How there's so many times where he meets 90% of my checklist, right? Everybody has, you know, what they need, and he fulfills most of my needs. Oh, but the guy at the grocery store, you know, he whatever. I mean, I don't even have a reason.
More funny,
but right, like, you know, I met this guy at work, and he makes me laugh. Not my husband doesn't make me laugh like the guy at work makes me laugh. And I work with my husband, so this is all hypothetical. But you know, it's like you see this 10% in other people that you don't have in your spouse. So then people start gravitating to that person with 10%, which then causes a separation in your marriage, which then can lead to divorce or separation or an emotional divorce, which is a whole topic for another podcast. But you go for this 10%, and guess what? Most of the couples that we have talked to that have divorced because of that 10% person go, oh, that 10% was really more like 2%. And the 98% of that person was way worse than the 90% of my spouse. But we're so focused on that small bit. So I think one of the things that can cause a divorce or a separation is focusing on that small bit that you feel like your mate is missing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people too, you grab that 10% person and you try to make them be 100%.
Yeah.
But they were never meant to be 100%. They were only ever 10%. So I feel bad for couples that do that, because then they realize a huge mistake they made, because they found someone who's got that 10% and they just left everything for that.
Yeah.
And then you realize that's all they are. They are 10%. Now you're missing your 90%, you know? So it is sad when you get trapped into that.
Well, another thing I'd put on the list, Steve, is, and we talk about this all the time, but when you assume that a person's doing or saying whatever they're saying for a particular reason, and it has nothing to do with why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so, quick story, I was arranging for some trips with Noah. As a matter of fact, here, this would have been about 3 years ago. And I worked hard on it, back and forth with the office, to kind of work out what the trips were going to look like. It was back when everybody was traveling. And I'd worked on it for my schedule here. And I called through in the schedule, told Karen, I'm so happy it's done. We were getting ready to go do a marriage seminar. She discovered a glitch in it where I had double scheduled an Abiding Life trip and a thing I was doing here in the local area. So, being the good wife she is, she didn't want me to have to deal with it, because we were getting ready to go do a marriage seminar around here. Literally, we were leaving that morning. I go up to the church, I get all my stuff, pack up my projector. I come out and she says, hey, listen, I want you to know I called the office and told them you couldn't do that day. I completely lost it. Slammed the door, and we went to the seminar, and we were totally silent for the 45 minutes that we had to drive there. I'm stewing like crazy. Now, the bottom line is Karen finally asked Jesus, and she listened to Jesus, and I didn't, and I repented. But what went wrong was, I thought she did that, and it was disrespectful, and she was trying to control me. That's what I believed in my mind, is this woman is trying to control me.
Yeah.
Do you know why she did it when I finally got around to asking her? Is because she knew I had a lot on my plate, and she just wanted to ease up everything that I had to do. And she knew that was something she could do simply, and it wouldn't be any big deal.
Yeah.
So when that happens again and again, and you make that assumption and you never even take the time to clarify. I mean, I was mad for almost 4 hours
Yeah.
while I'm getting ready to do a marriage seminar.
Yeah.
Well, what happens, people just repeat that over and over again. Now, the hypocrisy of who I am obviously came out at that moment.
Mm.
But the reason marriages fall apart is because people keep doing that again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that 4 hours you were stewing, what kind of voices were you hearing in that?
Oh, honestly, you want the truth?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put in for this.
Yeah, exactly.
I deserve to be treated better than this.
Yeah.
I'm a really smart guy. I mean, I'm doing honestly, this is what I'm doing. I'm leading a marriage seminar.
Mm-hmm.
Who is she to be telling me how to get rid of my stress? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm gonna lay my foot down because, and it just goes from there.
Well, just so you know, I've heard the exact same stuff. So
I think that's why it needs to be talked about, because we all hear bad things about our spouses, and I think that we just feel like we're the only ones, and then we feel awful, and we're going to be led to divorce because all of this stuff. And that's why I feel like marriage needs to be not a taboo subject to talk about, whether you're happy or you're getting a divorce or you're going through turmoil. It's like, oh, if you're going through turmoil, just go get counseling. There's nothing wrong with counseling. I love counseling. But it's like, we need to be able to say, hey, yeah, us too. Oh yeah, we've been through that too. But instead we feel guilt and shame behind it of, I can't believe I thought that about my spouse, especially being in ministry. There's a lot of pressure of, I can't go to somebody and say, man, we had a close call last week. We almost divorced. Because then people are going to go, what?
Yeah, what are you
but you're in ministry. You can't have thoughts like that. Yeah. You can't have those struggles. And that's why I love doing these podcasts, because we can be real and honest and raw, as difficult as it sometimes is. But the whole sole purpose of this podcast is, one, to point you to Jesus, and two, to let you know that you're not alone. Like, you're normal. You're not special. You're normal. Like, we all have thoughts about our spouses, our kids, it's just, that is life. And I think that that's why podcasts like this are so important, to let people know that, hey, I've had those same thoughts too.
And if I can do a mini commercial, because I'm going to, and it's not for counseling. The difference between what you just said, Shay, and I really appreciate what you just said, and I appreciate what the purpose of the podcast is. The reason that's important is, in the world, this is what we say. And I've got a lot of friends who are not a part of the body of Christ. They would make some of the statements you made and just say, we're all imperfect and so on and so forth. And they just say, yeah, that's it. So go ahead, do what you want to do, be happy. Yeah. Nobody says, no, dude, there's a way out of this.
Yeah.
There is a way out of this. And there's this guy named Jesus who has something so much better for you, transformational for you and for your mate. And, you don't have to drown in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for saying what you said.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think that's in terms of that, we're kind of running out of time. But our last podcast, I brought up the Beatitudes again, and honestly, I think for me, some of the best ways that I've actually experienced the Beatitudes is being married and raising kids and having friends, and so in one of those. I remember telling someone one time, he was riding with me. It was obvious that Barb was really feeling a lot of hatred toward me, and he called her and he goes, well, it's, you're acting like Steve's the devil, and she goes, well, it's obvious he is, he's like the devil incarnate, and sometimes it's true, I am, so she. But I recognized like Shay said, I saw God in it afterwards. Is like, how are you going to learn to? He said, "Blessed when people hate you."
Mm.
He didn't say you're blessed when your wife really loves you a lot and she meets the 100%.
Yeah.
He said, "Blessed are you when basically she's meeting 0% of your need, and you turn to me, and you focus, and I'm your focus, and I'm your life, and you come to me for everything that you were initially you kind of faked out to that you were going to get from her, love and acceptance and freedom, and that you can say anything to him." And so I think that's Barb has been my best teacher in so many ways, and in walking and focusing on Christ. And so to kind of jump on the bandwagon of with what you just said, Tim, one of the times I was standing, and I don't know about you guys, but I was standing in a Home Depot line returning something, and it's like, well, I'm standing there in line, waiting, and all of a sudden the thought comes to me. This just a couple of years ago. Is like, I am not happily married.
Mm.
I am not happily married.
Mm-hmm.
I really am struggling with being married to Barb and my marriage. And so I came home and I said, I had this really weird experience standing in the Home Depot line, return line. And she goes, "What?" And I said, "I'm just not happily married."
Mm.
And she goes, "Wow, funny you say that. I'm not either."
Huh.
And it's, wow. It's like, well, so now what? And we can talk about it. And so, that was a beginning of a really nice shift in our marriage. And I think marriages are like heartbeats to me.
Mm-hmm.
They go up and down, up and down, up and down. But the idea that we've all been talking about, to bring things into the light, and Jesus is the light, and to be able to see him in everything, and whether we're happily married or in the midst of huge conflict, or have been divorced, or have our kids go do nutty things, to be able to, like Shay said, to be able to see God in everything, and we might struggle in the midst of it to have that happen, but to be able to, I think part of the thing that causes me the most misery is I'm in the middle of it and I'm miserable because I don't see him in it. And then as soon as the scales pop off and it goes like, oh, like that, I could go, yeah, oh my gosh, I've been unhappily married for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's like the scales pop off and it's like, wow,
right.
God's in that. And so anyway, thanks for letting me ramble on.
No,
that's an important story to say, because I think it just
agree.
shows how many people really do have that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's a reality. And do we have about 90 seconds for me to confess something, Steve?
Sure.
Well, I want to be clear for anybody that's listening. Obviously, I said I was divorced before, married before and divorced. Don't you dare go jumping to conclusions about my former mate. Oh, if you catch me on my worst day, I'll be more, I wouldn't, but I would be capable of filling your head full of all the reasons I think I'm amazing and she was not.
Mm-hmm.
But to the point of God's in it, that like you guys were sharing before, some of you know me for a long time, a lot of you not, but the truth is there was one of the things that God did throughout the entirety of my marriage, and finally, when I was unable to keep my marriage together because I did not want a divorce, was God dealt a significant blow to my pride. Because in my mind, I am the great Tim Lester. I can salvage anything. I can talk myself out of anything. And no matter what, I can fix that Hummer. I don't fail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? My marriage failed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not glad for that. And I want everybody to hear that. It was devastating to me, for everyone that was involved in that process, my career path, all that. But you know what? There was a great gift that was given to me. And it was a death blow to my pride. Now, I'm not saying I'm incapable of pride right now, but I'm just telling you, there was a significant blow that came, and it taught me that I can't fix everything. And that literally the most basic principle we teach all the time, that apart from Christ, I'm incapable of even the simplest of kindnesses to people, including my former mate. Well, I'm telling you, while I hated that I got divorced and I didn't want the divorce, there's another conversation I can have about my divorce is in the hand of Almighty God. Even that was transformative in my life. And you can't spend enough money or pay anybody or go to enough classes to get that. I am the man I am today because of what God did in spite of my divorce and with it. And I'm grateful.
Yeah, and I think it just shows us yet again how much he's in everything, how much he's in a relationship with each and every one of us, and how it looks different, but it's the same. Just really cool how he does things with us.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Jim. That was beautiful, and just the humility that you expressed was remarkable.
If you guys knew, and I can't, it's so free to be free of arrogance. It's not that I never get prideful again, but to not want to be arrogant is freedom for me. I literally could die a happy man, and God did that, you know.
Yeah, I love it. Amen.
Sorry.
Me too.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys so much for sharing your hearts, sharing scary things, and bringing things to the light. I just want to say thank you. I do want to end it on, I was searching the Bible last night, Shay and I, on, trying to find what God and Jesus said about divorce. And I was not able to find anywhere where it said, one, I was going to hell if I divorced. It never said once that it was an unforgivable sin, unless maybe I got the wrong Bible. I mean, Shay let me borrow her study Bible, so maybe I have the wrong Bible. But the one I have has not said that. And to me, that just shows yet again how much grace God gives us, how much love he gives us. And just like your guys' story, just how much he walks with us in everything. Even when we're in divorce, even when we make a mistake, he's in it and he teaches us something so huge out of it. Something that brings you guys to tears. And that's you can't go to college for that stuff.
Right.
You can't go and read a book. That is stuff that only Jesus, God, can teach you. And that kind of stuff sticks with you your whole life. That is what is so sweet.
And I would just like to add on there that there's a huge cost for that intimacy. And Christ paid it all, and we get to enter into it. But it's not what Tim went through. I knew him then. It was a huge cost. But it's cool that you said, I don't think you regret it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah, you learn so much out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, man, thank you guys for sharing all this. I mean, I appreciate your heart, and just if for people that are listening, in the South, when we think you're going to jump to conclusions, we say, I double dog dare you to do this, or think about something, or do it differently. So if you're sitting there thinking these guys are lunatics and they've completely thrown out the Bible, and they're just talking about what they feel and all that. I double dog dare you to ask long, hard questions. I double dog dare you to go back to the Bible again and read what it actually says about all this.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're still mad at anybody that's on here or you got questions, why don't you do what Noah and Shay have been saying the whole time? They've been saying about marriage. How about bringing it into the light?
Mm-hmm.
Not to have a debate,
Yeah.
but to hold this whole thing up into the light, and rather than disconnecting from each other,
Mm-hmm.
to actually come together, because
Yeah.
amazing things happen.
Yeah.
Good point. So with that, I'd invite you to give all your feedback to Noah.
Amen.
And the negative feedback, the positive feedback. But actually, Tim, what you've just brought up is so important, and in terms of the podcast and our Thursday night abiding discussions or conversations, the feedback and the questions that people send in to Noah become topics for podcasts. So maybe, maybe it's not about divorce, but maybe it's about a relationship or, anything walking with the Lord. It would be great to have our listeners' feedback and those questions that you just mentioned, or complaints, because we're not saying we got it right, but we are saying we know how to walk with God in the middle of a lot of difficult and scary and messy situations.
Yeah.
Amen.
That are in the world, and we have that in the world right now. So it's it's a great time. If there ever was a good time to be a believer, it's like right now.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So you can email me at noahwells7@gmail.com. And it goes right to my phone, so I'll get it right away.
Sweet. I'm going to be on vacation for 3 weeks now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your hearts. Thank you for the listeners. We'll do another one soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.